So the Republican Party, they're not only moving further to the right, but they're simultaneously becoming more and more insane with every passing day. And we know this because the policies that they're proposing are so far outside the range of respectability that you can't support them unless you're a lunatic. Now, we had a perfect example of this on MSNBC when Tennessee lawmaker Diane Black talked about repealing a Reagan-era law that protects people from dying.
So let me tell you, Chuck, I'm an emergency room nurse. There are people that came into my emergency room that I, the nurse, was the first one to see them, that I could have sent them to a walk-in clinic or their doctor the next day, but because of a law that Congress put into place to say, no, I have to treat everybody that walks in that emergency room, you took away our ability to be able to say, no, an emergency room is not the proper place. And then you put a burden on top of that to say you must do that.
So you would get rid of the law that mandates emergency rooms to see every patient that shows up?
I would get rid of a law that says that you are not allowed as a healthcare professional to make that decision about whether someone can be appropriately treated the next day or at a walk-in clinic or at their doctor. But we must treat everybody that walks in, whether you've had a sore throat for a week. We must see them. And that crowds the emergency room. It drives the cost of emergencies up. And so, yeah, if someone comes in from an auto accident, I don't want to ask whether they have insurance or not. I'm going to take care of them. But what it did is crowd my emergency room where I work and disallowed me from using my good judgment skills, of which I was trained to do, and doctors are as well. And it's the federal government said, you must, and you can't make those decisions. And I think that was a poor thing for us to do. It's driven the cost of health care up, and especially in the emergency rooms.
So make no mistake about it, she's talking about the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, otherwise known as EMTALA, which was passed by President Reagan in 1986. So this is how insane the Republican Party has become. A law that Reagan passed is now too liberal for today's modern Republican Party. She says here that this law took away our ability to say no in emergency rooms and say that, you know, it's not the place for them to seek the treatment that they're seeking. But if you don't see them and you just turn them away based on their symptoms, then how would you know that there's not something more serious going on? And understand why EMTALA exists. It's because people without insurance, well, if they go to a doctor, they'll get turned away. They'll be told to go get insurance. So knowing that at the emergency room, they can't be refused service, then they go there to seek treatment. And if they are not able to get seen at an emergency room, then people with just general illnesses, it's going to get worse. The problem will be exacerbated, and this will lead to people dying. What is wrong with you? How could you be against something that's a no-brainer? Now, she says it's bad because it drives costs of healthcare up in emergency rooms and crowds emergency rooms, but this is only a symptom of our cruel healthcare system that doesn't offer free healthcare to everybody. So if you really don't want emergency rooms to be crowded, then what you need to do is start petitioning every single one of your colleagues to support Medicare for All. Have you co-sponsored John Conyers' Medicare for All bill? HR 676? Because if you haven't, then apparently you don't really care about this. But this is a nurse. She says that, you know, we should, or she implies certainly that we should accept her argument because she has experience. She's a nurse, therefore she has more credibility. But all this tells me is that you're the worst nurse ever. You suck at your job. If anybody sees you as the nurse at the emergency room, then they should run the other way and go to another emergency room because clearly you don't give a shit about people. In repealing this law, you know people will die. You're a nurse. You know this firsthand. So how could you support something that's a no-brainer even to right-wing conservatives like Reagan, Republican Jesus? How could you be against that? It shows just how crazy the Republican Party has become. To be against something like EMTALA, which nobody would question before, you have to be a lunatic. And to be a nurse, I think that makes it even more egregious. She thinks that this helps her argument. No, this just goes to show you that you are an objectively bad person. You want EMTALA to be repealed, so that way you can turn people away at the emergency room, and this will lead to people dying. So if Republicans are honestly going to think that they're going to sell the American people this idea that more people should be turned away and not given health care, they're not. Because if you don't have health insurance, you go to an emergency room. And basically what she wants to do is weed out the hypochondriacs that might come to the emergency room, because they're sick all the time. It's all in their heads. Well, look, for one, that's not up to you to determine. Do your job. See them. And then you determine from there, based on your professional opinion, whether or not they have a real illness or not. But you don't get to turn them away before you even see them. And furthermore, it shows how out of touch you are, because people show up because they don't have insurance. They know damn well that they're going to get a huge medical bill. I have friends that did this all the time, where you go to the emergency room because you don't have insurance. And that's the only way you're going to get antibiotics if you're sick. So, Diane Black, you are a complete lunatic. And to think that you're a nurse, that really scares me. I hope there are no other nurses that have your views of healthcare, because if so, then that goes to show why so many people are dying in the country, because of idiots like you. For a nurse to say this, what is wrong with you? What are you thinking?
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.